Dehydrated meat products are another specialized process that is increasing in popularity. And these dehydrated meat products can really add value for a particular business. It can allow them to make an ethnic food. It can also allow them to make something that they can sell out of their establishment. And so one of the reasons why dehydrated meat products is a little bit trickier sometimes for regulation is that you're relying on the removal of that water to render the food non-TCS. And traditionally this is measured with a water activity meter, but that's a really expensive, really delicate, kind of finicky piece of equipment that isn't always practical. And so we've followed some literature and some research that shows that if you control the thickness of a piece of meat and then heat treat it before dehydrating at a specific temperature for a specific amount of time, then that correlates with a water activity reduction that allows for the product to be considered of equal safety to that in the code. And so we're going to demonstrate that here. And one of the things here that's a little bit unique to a food establishment or a kitchen environment is that we're going to have to measure something using a ruler. And this is something that we might want to assume that everyone can do, but this will be an important part of training for this specialized process to make sure that everyone is using that measuring device equally and using it consistently so that you have a product that is following the process. The recipe that we're using is based off of a research study that validated the process using pieces of beef that were no more than 15 centimeters long and 1.5 by 1.5 centimeters thick and wide. And so we're using a measuring device here. Here I just have a plastic ruler. You could use a metal ruler. You could even use calipers if you had them, as long as there's something that can be cleaned and sanitized and it's something that employees are trained to use. So you can see here that the steak that I have is closer to 12 centimeters long. So it's totally fine. With these types of metrics, you can go thinner, you can go shorter. You just can't go with something that is thicker because you're not necessarily going to get the proper dehydration. And also, if you look at this and we take the measurement, we're just a little bit over 1.5 centimeters wide. So we're going to have to cut those down a little bit. But you're going to want to line that steak up, and then 1.5 centimeters is about here. So you're going to make a cut. There, and then since not every piece of steak is going to be of equal thickness all over the entire thing, you're going to take that measurement. See, it's a little bit too thick there, just about the right thickness here. So I'm going to cut it here and trim this piece down. Again, you can have smaller pieces, that's okay, they'll just dehydrate faster. The problem is if you have thicker pieces that are not necessarily going to dehydrate at the right rate, and then you can end up with something that's of public health concern. So again, kind of turning this one again to make sure that we're getting to the right thickness. So this one just needs a little tiny bit shaved off. All right, so these are going to be added to the marinade, and the marinade can be done over several hours. And then the recipe that we're using has the beef boil in the marinade until it reaches an internal temperature of 160 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and let that start boiling. And I'm going to go wash my hands. So the beef needs to boil until it gets to an internal temperature of at least 160. And we're doing this because, again, that research is based off of a heat treatment as well as dehydration. And so then we're going to take those pieces and we're going to put them on a paper towel just to help blot off some of that excess liquid before you put it in the dehydrator. Now, once that beef has been boiled and then blot dry, it'll just be added to the rack of a dehydrator. Now, dehydrators in a commercial setting are probably gonna be a lot bigger. There are much larger units that can dry larger amounts at the same time. And so this would be covered, and then the dehydration for this particular process would be 10 hours between 135 and 145 degrees. But depending on the validated recipe that someone is using, that might vary a little bit. And so this is what the product looks like when it's done. And so this particular one is still pretty tough, but this is considered now a non-TCS beef product.